This is Pivot Perspectives with Chris O'Byrne, the show that takes you around the world to share interviews with some of the most successful and relevant people on the planet. Hear their stories and get the most important business lessons they've learned on their road to success, and get exclusive access on how to implement their success into your life and business. Pivot Perspectives is brought to you by the Strategic Advisor Board and your host, Chris O'Byrne.
Hey, are you looking to scale your business from 5 figures to 6 figures or 6 figures to 7 figures? If you are, I have the perfect thing for you. What I want you to do today is I want you to go download a book. This book is going to take you through my 3-pillar system. It's 100% free. All you have to do is go to growfast.cash. I say again, go to growfast.cash, and you're going to be able to download my free international best-selling book, which is called Be Good, Be Brief, Be Gone. You can take that book. It's going to help you scale your business to the next level. Again, go download it. Be good, be brief, be gone. Growfast.cash. I say again, growfast.cash. Enjoy.
Dennis Devlin, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate it.
So I am not going to, I'm going to dive right in with a deeper question. And what is a defining moment from your childhood that helped shape who you've become today?
Oh, wow. That is a deep question. It is a deep question. The most significant is a real personal one. My mother had tried to commit suicide when I was 16, and I had to save her life. So for a long time, that really did define my life going forward. Through a lot of therapy, certainly have been able to put it in its proper perspective. Obviously there is that saying that time heals all wounds. I'm not sure it is ever going to heal completely, but it has healed significantly over time. Probably the most impactful moment in my life, and obviously it was I was 16 at the time, so it really impacted some of my formative years still in development.
Yeah. So in what way did it impact you, especially looking at your growth trajectory through your life?
It sort of matured me to a great extent. Very early, probably earlier than I would normally have had to do that. I think I became sort of it really changed the dynamic, obviously, of with my mother, in terms of our relationship. There were times where it certainly became more me being more the parent, and her more the child. And it also, I think it really matured me in a way, where I acted very adult for my age. It impacted me further. I got married when I was 20. Not too many people get married that young, and I can assure you, still married today, and with the same person. And so it worked out, but that was I just was ready. It prepared me, I think, for the realities and the challenges sometimes that we face in our adult lives. Things don't always go our way, and we have to find some resiliency, I think, in terms of not only surviving but ultimately thriving.
So shifting into your area of expertise, how do you help clients find clarity when they're overwhelmed by data?
Well, I think you got to simplify. I think the first step whenever we're in an engagement or having discussions around an engagement is to first try to simplify to, what is the actual problem we're trying to solve or we're trying to address with a solution. we have to break it down, because sometimes people will focus on things that really are superfluous to the actual main issue that has to be addressed. And so what I encourage people to do when I first, have discussions with them is to think about, why do they feel like they might need research? What are they looking to learn? And when we boil it down to those more finer points, I guess you could say, it allows them to be able to focus much more clearly about what they're looking to gain from it. Because in the end, ultimately, what I want to deliver is a lot of value to those I serve. And I want them to also know of the value that they're gaining from the engagement.
How does somebody go about simplifying? What does that look like, and what are they simplifying? Are they simplifying the overriding question of what they're looking for, or do they have to go kind of deeper into their business and find some areas to simplify there?
Depends on whether I'm instigating, if you will, or initiating the conversation, or if a prospect or client is. If a prospect or client is initiating that conversation, they already have this notion that they need to have some research done. And so it seems like it's my responsibility to make sure that they're going to get the greatest return on that investment for what they pay for the research. So it typically requires them to, we have a discovery session, as a lot of interactions, obviously, in the B2B world are. And I'm really trying to understand, what's the impetus for the contact? Why do they want to consider doing research? Or what research do they really need in order to address the problem or question that they have that's core to why they want to do research? So we just go through a process where we clarify what those are. We make statements about what we're looking to learn, and then we prioritize what those statements are to allow them to focus on what's most important to them. And let's first focus on those. Let's make sure we can cover those. And if we can get the nice to haves as well, great. But sometimes there are cases where they're better served in a different project. Maybe they're not really closely aligned with the primary areas of need. So we'll kind of sort that out going through that exercise.
So what is one common barrier to business success that research can help solve?
I think it boils down to fear. Fear in all its different forms. When it comes to research, it's a fear of uncertainty. They have an uncertainty about the market, about their competition, about how successful their campaigns or products or services might be in the marketplace. Research helps to gain the clarity that provides that certainty, that allows them to make better informed decisions, stronger strategies, and ultimately greater business success.
So how do you make sure that your research delivers both clarity and actionable insights?
Focus. I think, obviously I start with clarity and look to do that throughout. But I think ultimately it's about the value that they can gain in the process, the learning that they get along the way. I think those things are part and parcel of what they're buying into and what they deserve as a client.
What is the most surprising insight you've discovered through your 30 years of experience?
Well, that most people don't know what they're doing ultimately when it comes to marketing and branding. They have to test things out. They have to try new things in order to grow their respective businesses. We don't have the answers typically right at the top of our minds. Right, we have to dig a little deeper, and we have to investigate in order to really learn what's going to work best for us, particularly as business owners. We're not all the same. And there are certain things that in our respective industries, our respective businesses are going to work better than maybe would work for, what works for us may not work for others.
Yeah. So this next question is about success stories. Can you share a time when a client's growth was transformed through your research?
Sure. Quite a few times this has happened, but I like to use an example from the work I've done with Procter & Gamble, and specifically relate a case study that I just posted actually on my website this morning. But it was in their baby care division or their strategic business unit. So that's where Pampers lives as a brand.
Yeah.
They have some other businesses in there as well that obviously are tailored toward baby care. But they were interested in, they had a process in place that helped with regard to developing ideas that were beneficial for commercial use. But they wanted to have a more effective process to put in place that would be across different product platforms, across regions. And I helped them kind of set up a design that would help address the learnings that were necessary in order to make that happen. And that was really helpful. They ended up generating this sort of like a product line, if you will, called Toy Box, which of course plays off the baby care name a little bit, where and it also kind of from just a ways about thinking about generating new ideas. That these ideas are sort of like toys, and being able to test those toys out in terms of how effective they would be in the marketplace. And they put that program in place, and they improved. I don't remember the exact percentages in terms of improvement, but their rate of success increased significantly by utilizing this process that research basically provided the direction and sort of the solution to what their initial problem was.
So this might be part of how you're finding that success, but you focus on things like curiosity, discovery, and honesty. Mm-hmm. How do those values shape your research process?
You have to have them ingrained within your work with clients. Approach that curiosity is foundational. In order to gain certainty, to overcome that uncertainty that I made a reference to earlier, we have to be deeply curious about our client, their products and services, who their competition is, who their audience is, who their target market is, in order to be really honed in on what we're trying to accomplish. And given that sort of foundational construct, then we go deeper. We look to go deeper with discovery. So things like looking into social media and seeing what people talk about with regard to this industry or these types of products and services, or about the brands themselves, and the brand itself and its competitors. Going deep, asking the next question, and then the next question. Never really being fully satisfied that you're going to get everything, but you're going to get a lot in the process of doing that. And then honesty is really about, it's about being truthful to what your brand really represents. I think one of the challenges that we have as marketers and folks in the branding space is so many in not only the business world, but those that are outside the business world that are, essentially what we refer to as, consumers. They are oftentimes very negative toward us. And I think it's because we've had some some bad apples in the bunch, and I think they've made it more difficult for us. It's like we think about like used car salespeople have made often just historically have this idea that they're snake oil salespeople, and they make it harder for everybody else. I think if we are honest about what our products and services really do accomplish and don't overpromise and then underdeliver, we're being true to our brand. We're being honest with our consumers, those that we are meant to serve. We are serving, ethically, and in a way that will also actually overall will benefit us greater than if we were not being honest. So we look to ingrain all three concepts of curiosity, discovery, and honesty within the construct of our working with our clients and in our projects.
So you talk about asking questions and going deeper.
Mm-hmm.
How do you know which questions to ask, and how do you know when to stop asking because you have reached the depth you're looking for?
Right. Well, I think in terms of asking what kinds of questions really is oftentimes based on how the responses come back from previous questions, right? We try to allow our clients some flexibility in terms of how they tell their story, if you will. We pride ourselves on being good listeners, strong listeners, deep listeners, just as we are deeply curious. I think what is part and parcel of that is being really strong listeners and being open to how the conversation flows. If we feel like it's being continued to be productive on their behalf, then we're doing our job. That's sort of like what I use as a litmus test, if you will, is am I getting from them what I need to actually support them? That's and when it starts to get less and less over time, it does. It just people get worn down, if you will. They get tired of answering questions, and you can get a sense for when it's no longer all that productive. I think it's more of a feeling than a particular type of response per se. It's recognizing, okay, I either have to stop completely, or I need to change my course of action in terms of my probing. Where do I need to go to get some other question answered or some sub-question answered in the process?
Yeah, I partially asked that question because that's exactly what I do in my interviews and in this interview. And I do sometimes ask myself, when do I stop digging deeper? When have I gone deep enough on that question? So that was helpful for that. Why do you think research or investing in research offers such a high return?
Commitment. I think it's commitment on the part of the person making the investment, but I think it's also a commitment on the part of, say, myself in responding to that payoff, if you will, and making sure that we get everything we possibly can in terms of value out of the engagement. It's got to be one where there's value along the way. We try to bring in value at each phase in order to make sure that there's a significant payoff. Because it ends up being, Chris, I think, an exponential impact as opposed to something that's additive. When you're talking about making an investment in your business, and you're talking about learning in order to be able to be clearer about your customer, understanding them more effectively, your competition, knowing sort of where you need to position yourself in order to be more effective in your industry, and then ultimately about your brand and making sure that your brand is being honest and is positioned most effectively from a messaging standpoint, you're going to have an exponential payoff from that. And so that's where I think the return on investment comes into play, is that bigger payoff from all the learning that you gain. What's critical is internally, the, the, the client, if you will, needs to embrace the learning and be able to import it into what they do, into their strategy. It's not going to be as valuable if they don't use it, right? If they don't use the learning in order to improve their products, improve their services, or improve their process, in order to make sure that those they're serving are served well and served better than they had been in the past.
And for the listeners, I'd like to point out that we tend to gloss over that term exponential without really understanding what it means. We just think, oh, it's a lot. But it's really, it's the difference from going from 10 to 20 to 10 to 100
Right.
in a step.
Right.
And that's what exponential is. So I just want people to understand the value of this kind of research, because it's, I think for a lot of business owners, they're visionary, they're big picture, and they tend to not focus on the details to the detriment of their business. And this is a way of solving that.
Yeah, strategic research can be transformational from a financial perspective for business, because it really helps improve the bottom line. You can increase your revenues by being able to sell more because you understand customers better. You can increase your margins by being more closely aligned with what your expenses are. Maybe you need to change how you're doing things, and you've learned that through research. And you can increase your market share by understanding your competitors more effectively, because you've gained a little bit better understanding of your best position in the marketplace, and you make an adjustment. Maybe you rebrand your business, for example. So it can hit all three bottom line financial performance indicators, right? Higher revenues, higher margins, and higher share, by being able to implement learnings from research investments.
It pays to take more of that scientific approach instead of just what we're used to doing. So what advice would you give to businesses that struggle with clarity in their strategies?
Be open to considering research as a way to help your business grow. I think that too often times, in terms of what my experience has been, too often times I've encountered people who are a little closed-minded in terms of what they think they need to do to grow their business, and they struggle, sometimes just by inaction. And I think being open to recognizing that perhaps research could be an answer.
Looking to grow your business beyond 5 figures, 6 figures, 7 figures plus, what I want you to do is go download this book. The title is called Be Good, Be Brief, Be Gone. It will help you grow your business past 5, 6, and 7 figure. Go download the book today, growfast.cash. I say again, growfast.cash, and download the book for absolutely free.
To help your business grow in really significant ways. So I think an open mind is first and foremost. I think as time goes on, you can gain a greater appreciation for the value of research. When I speak to people about potentially doing research for them, they, in a very broad sense, fall in these two buckets. Either they appreciate and understand the value of research, or they do not. And it's a whole different conversation for me, right, in terms of trying to get them to think a little differently. If they already value research, I don't have to, quote unquote, sell them or convince them that research is a good investment. Then it's just about making sure that clarity in my business is a good choice or a better choice than others that they could select as a provider. When it's a situation where they don't value research, I have to educate. I have to convince them of the benefits that they will gain from making that investment. Too often times they will look at research as a cost. And I think it's unfortunately, a very limiting belief about the value of research. If they only look at things like research as a cost, they're not recognizing the opportunity that's inherent in the investment. And so they're missing out on opportunities for their business to grow simply by closing the door and not considering research as a possible solution.
So in addition to that cost factor, what are some of the other big misconceptions that businesses have about market research?
Sometimes companies will look at a provider and think they're just going to sort of go off and do it all their own. That, oh, well, researchers are just other consultants who tell you what you should do. And, it's very much a collaborative effort. I'm not good, like when I talk to a prospect, particularly for the first time, I'm not trying to suggest that I know their industry as well as they do or better than they do. That is the furthest thought from my mind. We need to work together. We need to work in a collaborative way in order to help move their business forward. The more I understand about their business, about their competition, about their customer, the more that I can help them. I need to understand where they are and where they want to go. And I think sometimes there's just this thought that that a consultant, like a researcher, will just go and sort of do their own thing. This is about buy-in. It's about commitment, as I made a reference to earlier, a commitment to the process and working together in a way that ends up being very beneficial in the long run.
Why did you write your latest book, Three Wise Monkeys?
Right. So, yeah, Three Wise Monkeys was really a passion project for me. I felt it was a story that I had in me that I needed to tell. And it really was, just an idea that I had. I had written a book co-authored a book previously, so I had a feel for what was involved in terms of commitment in that regard of writing a book. But I felt like it was something that needed to be shared, and I was able to do it in such a way to kind of align with the Three Wise Monkeys Japanese axiom that most of us are very familiar with, and aligning those three different concepts that we talked about earlier: curiosity, discovery, and honesty around customers, competition, and your own company brand. And so I think it had a nice structure to it that I think helps tell the story pretty effectively.
Who is the ideal reader for that book?
That it appeals most to heads of marketing. I think that's really the primary. We're trying to get folks that lead marketing efforts to think about, who they're trying, what they're responsible for, and putting it in a context that's easy to understand. Because I think some people are, if they're not too familiar with research, it can be a little daunting. It's like, well, I'm going to give you all this information about my business, and you're going to find out even more about my business. And there's vulnerability with that. And I think making it easier for them to understand makes it easier for them to accept, the approach. And I think more open to considering research as a way to grow their business.
What advice do you have for other business owners who are thinking about writing a book?
This one is, well, there's a couple that come to mind immediately. One is make sure you really map out from an outline standpoint, what do you want to cover and how do you want to cover it? Because I think the effectiveness of storytelling is really enhanced when you have a plan before starting to write. And, in both of the books that I've co-authored, we actually put the sort of the outline in a graphic format on the back of the book, and it's meant to make it really straightforward in terms of what the concepts we're going to cover, and I think it just makes it easier for the reader. And I think you want to make it easier for the reader because they're not going to pick it up and read it if it's perceived as challenging. And the second thing I'd say is you need to be disciplined about it. You need to be disciplined about writing, and recognize it takes time, and to break down that time. Because once we have the outline, then it's about looking at it sort of like chapter by chapter and just focusing, a chapter at a time and not getting overwhelmed. I think so few people write books because they huge, overwhelming chore, for want of a better phrase. And I'll get to it someday, and then they may never get to it at all, or they wait till they get, they're retired or whatever. If you want to get it done sooner, my suggestion, not outside of the outline, is to set specific times when you are going to be most productive in terms of your writing, which for most people, I think it's probably early morning. Set a daily practice, and then not only have that intention, but then to act on it on a regular basis. Because there are going to be days you might not feel like writing. It just might not be in you that day or whatever. But if you commit to it, you'll make progress. And I think that's what was key in both of the first couple of books that I've co-authored is focusing on progress in terms of the development of the book, and then focus on sort of a chapter or section at a time, because the focus allows you to also make progress.
So if you were to write a third book, what would that be about?
Yeah, so I already have a book in mind, and it's really about this concept of clarity, because I think for business people and marketers and those in the branding space are particularly in need of clarity, I think. And recognizing how important it is in their business, not just within the marketing and branding spaces, but just in terms of the way they think and the way they act. I think intention and clarity are two very powerful motivators to success. And gaining some clarity about how you move forward is paramount to moving forward. And I'm going to bring in obviously elements of research and kinds of research to gain certain kinds of clarity, but recognizing that any gain in clarity is going to be a positive.
What do you mean by different kinds of research? How would you define the different types of research that somebody should think about?
Right. Well, there's different ways of looking at ways to do research, but one of the basic ones is qualitative research versus quantitative research, which are at a very basic level answering two different kinds of questions. Qualitative research at a very basic level is about understanding sort of underlying motivations, desires, wants, needs of those you're serving. Quantitative is how many people think or feel or act a given way that maybe you've learned from qualitative research. You get to quantify it. You can understand impact. So, in other words, if you find that if you're selling, I'm just going to throw out an example off the top of my head, but if you were looking to buy a wrench, a certain kind of wrench, you might have a problem that you want to solve that will be solved with this particular type of wrench. You might have different options of being able to get that problem solved, but we need to know, what's your motivation, what's your reason for needing it or wanting this product. And what does it need to have And then from what we learn there, we can take out some of the learnings and say, okay, well, how many people think or feel or act that way to understand impact? And so the greater the impact, the bigger the payoff if they were to bring that product to market. So that's one way of thinking. Different kinds of research, I think, provide different kinds of clarity. But there are others as well. There's others as well, and that's one of the things I'm thinking about in terms of what might get included in this third book. This is about elevating the importance of clarity, and particularly in a marketing and branding context, to really improve your chances for success.
What tips do you have for people who want to get started doing market research on their own?
Do-it-yourself research?
Yeah.
Well,
somebody's going to listen or read want, like, oh, yeah, I got to do this.
Yeah. Well, I think there are a lot of tools online now. I mean, you can do, you can do a Google search and find lots of different options in terms of do-it-yourself research tools. And that can work for certain people, if they have a little understanding. If they want to do a survey of their customers, for example, they can very inexpensively get an online survey platform tool. SurveyMonkey is one that comes to mind. There are others, of course. They can spend a fairly minimal amount, all things considered, in terms of being able to become a user of that platform. I think it costs less than $1,000 a year. And they can learn through tutorials that they have on that platform how to use it effectively. I think the biggest challenge that someone who might take that route for doing surveying themselves is, do they really understand the kinds of questions that they need to ask to get the answers they're really looking for in order to move forward? And I think sometimes it can be helpful to, even if you want to do as much as you can on your own, you may still benefit from having certain portions of the projects where you get some help. I'd say very much about, like survey questionnaire development, or if it's for qualitative research, it might be helping with regard to discussion guide development. If you want to set up a discussion guide for qualitative research for an interview, personal interview, or for focus group, for example. Because I think you may be familiar with the term GIGO, right? Garbage in, garbage out. So
yes.
If we don't do our due diligence in making sure that we're asking the right questions to get the kinds of answers that we're looking to get in order to move our respective businesses forward, we can really fail. And so a lot of time, effort, and some money has been wasted. So, I encourage people to recognize that maybe having someone who has experience in the space might be of benefit to them, even if they want to try to keep costs down and they want to try to do more of it themselves.
What parting words of wisdom do you have?
That's a loaded question.
Yep.
Parting words. Well, my message has been and continues to be about clarity. I would encourage people to recognize that it is important. It's important not just in a business context, but in their life. What I shared at the beginning of our interview, obviously a very personal share, if you will, but it gave me so much more clarity about who I was, about me as an adult, and what I wanted to make for my life. Sometimes our most challenging times of our lives are the most positively impactful. I don't think I always felt that way about that incident. Certainly at the time, I did not. But I think time allows us to gain some wisdom of what happens in our lives and how we can respond in a positive way.
Where can people go to learn more about you and what you do and perhaps find some clarity on their own?
Me, I'm not hiding. So, obviously on LinkedIn is Dennis Devlin. Pretty easy to find me. I'm based in Cincinnati. So if there's any question, I might be the only one, I don't know, in Cincinnati. My website is, clarity-us.com. We have case studies on there. We have a lot of blog posts giving you ideas around clarity and whatnot. There's lots of opportunities to find out more about me and my business.
Dennis, thank you so much for coming on today.
I appreciate your time, Chris. Thank you for the opportunity.
Hey, we all want to scale our business. Hey, I have the answer for you today to help you do that. If you're looking to scale from 5, 6, even 7 figures and beyond, book called Be Good, Be Brief, Be Gone. I'm going to give it to you for free. All you have to do is type in growfast.cash. I say again, growfast.cash, and you can download the book for absolutely free. I hope the book helps you this year. Take your business to the next level. Again, go grab the book, growfast.cash. I say again, growfast.cash. I wish you the best and grow, scale, and win.
Thanks for listening to Pivot Perspectives with your host, Chris O'Byrne. Please leave your feedback and visit strategicadvisorboard.com to get the latest and greatest business advice on the planet. Follow us on social media for updates, and we will see you on the next episode.
There it is. Magnum. Holy moly.
Yeah, baby! That's what I've been waiting for!
Dear God, it's beautiful.